RL. Now we'd like to go on to Patricia McPherson to talk about Bayona Wetlands. Patricia, are you still on the call? There we go. This is our slideshow. If people want to turn off their video, they can. We're going to have a slideshow.
Can you hear me there?
Patricia, yeah.
Yeah, you guys can hear me now? I'm on an iPhone that is actually short on power. My computer's not connecting.
Well, we can see you. We can see you and hear you.
Okay, so let's just try and do this as much as we can before I fail with power. My computer's all screwed up here. But go ahead, Richard, just run those slides. And you can take me off screen and run the PowerPoint. And by the way, as far as R.L. Miller saying that this is localized, while this may be localized, it is symptomatic and a model of what is going on across the country. Richard?
Let's keep talking.
Can you put the slides on?
The slide, the one slide with the map is on there. Do you want the next one?
I can't see it. All I can see are the people. I'm sorry. If the slides are up, is the on the future of Bayona Wetlands ecological thing up? Yes. I'll just fly blind and go by what you tell me.
Yeah, the heading is, what's the state's intention, their preferred plan, non-historic estuary.
All right, well, let me just go with this and then, because I can't see it on the iPhone either. What prompts our outreach right now is to add new organizations to protect Bayona is the Fish and Wildlife's release of their environmental impact report and development plans for Bayona Wetlands Ecological Reserve. And it was released of major. The federal counterpart, the Army Corps of Engineers permitting, relies upon accurate fish and wildlife data, and therefore the federal impact study won't be released anytime soon. But meanwhile, we've continued to push for a true restoration based on what was promised to the public and stakeholders, and based upon the documented history and science of the site. Bayona is predominantly a seasonal freshwater wetlands, yet there has been no seasonal freshwater alternative even offered. There are no Bayona-specific hydrology studies. Instead, only the inaccurate flood control models of the channel were provided. What is laid out in the current plans provides no restoration of what Bayona is. And instead, if you look at this map, you can see that, hang on, that what we're looking at here is a diagram from the EIR that promotes the false premise that Bayona is a saltwater wetlands and that the ebb and flow of the ocean needs to be brought in to save Bayona from drying out. Well, number one, the ebb and flow of the ocean water over Bayona hasn't existed for thousands of years. And as far as saving Bayona from drying out, Bayona's freshwater is historically at or near the surface with multiple underlying freshwater aquifers that I'll show you that are being threatened by this plan. The plan requires what you're seeing here is an industrial scale bulldozing to remove the current levees, which is along the blue channel there, and to dig out Bayona to not restore it, but convert it into a saltwater bay, surrounded by miles of new levees, which is the red line that goes around the entire area on this diagram. And when they dig this out, they will be putting the soils into the areas that are marked as yellow, which are BERMS, that they're calling BERMS, up to 40 feet. So they will be burying all that habitat. And what's also important about this map is that Bayona is sandwiched under the influence of SoCalGas underground gas storage operations and their area of influence, which is in the peach color. And they stand to gain from this plan, as does Playa Vista, which I'll be explaining here in a minute. Next slide, please. Should be Bayona Wetlands here in the, once upon a time, amidst this convoluted history of corporate greed and benefits in Los Angeles, a unique coastal habitat of great diversity was saved from development through litigation and fact-finding. And a Tonga Native American, John Tommy Rosas, registered the lands and waters of Bayona as a sacred site. Bayona is a very unique site that offers rare grasslands, uplands, and predominantly freshwater seasonal wetlands. And it's home to numerous rare and endangered species. And now, after having saved it, we are working to save it again from corporate interests and agencies partnering with those interests. Slide 3, please, which would be Bayona Wetlands, which is actually slide 4, I think, Richard, if you can hear me.
Yeah, Patricia,
Okay.
we have the view of the Bayona Channel with areas A, B, and C.
D, D. Okay, good. That's good. What I need for you to notice in this is, again, this is the Bayona Wetlands Ecological Reserve, A, B, C. D is where Playa Vista is, there on the east side of Lincoln Boulevard. And we and other groups spent years litigating and working to save it from development. And our efforts secured Area A, B, and C in 2004, and also secured the highest protective status from the state, which is that of an ecological reserve. Go to slide 4, please. And this is a watershed map that includes the Culver City's relationship to Bayona. And Grassroots and the Sierra Club have been working for years with Culver City on the oil field issues of the Inglewood oil field, and sharing our experts and protecting residents and habitat from that. But it's also, we've worked together on the Park to Playa idea of connecting these two areas and have it be habitat from Culver City all the way out to the ocean. Next slide, please. In 1999, we went to the Los Angeles Department of Building and Safety to alert and provide our data regarding our concerns about the oil field outgassing that was occurring in Bayona from the Playa del Rey oil field and SoCalGas underground gas storage operations, which you see SoCal there in the tan area. And this is a diagram that Exploration Technologies created because LADBS set precedents by securing an out-of-state, unconflicted company to act as a peer reviewer of data and ultimately as the city's gas experts performing their own gas studies of the region, which the conflicts that exist here are politically oriented, are financially oriented, and the Playa Vista studies done to that point and still, which are the studies that Fish and Wildlife uses today, at that time they were inaccurate, known to be inaccurate, and we have since proved the inaccuracies that I'll show you again tonight. But this map created by ETI demonstrates their general findings, which is namely that this is one of the largest oil field gas seepage areas in the country, which is why we're working to shut down the SoCalGas underground storage facility. By 2001 and 2, LADBS in the city of LA also, you can see in that first big red blob, what cuts through is Lincoln Boulevard. And LADBS in the city disallowed any residential building west of Lincoln Boulevard because of the dangers of building directly over the gas storage operations of SoCalGas. And at that time, Playa Vista leadership, knowing they could not develop that in a residential setting, looked for and worked with the state to secure bond funds, and ultimately the public has paid $140 million for the acquisition of the lands west of Lincoln Boulevard. And Area C was also part of a deal earlier on. Next slide, please. This is an early slide that shows the Friends of Bayona settlement with the California Coastal Commission. And I'm just showing this to let you know what the land use plan that was offered there. A lot of it was already slated to remain as open space, and the Friends of Bayona were able to secure the yellow portion there, which now contains the freshwater marsh, which is the catch basin for Playa Vista's flood control system. That is public trust land, and it is now and still controlled by Playa Vista, which we believe to be a high conflict of interest. Next slide, please. Here is some of the old 1952 photographs of Bayona Wetlands, which also show that it is a predominantly seasonal freshwater wetland. And again, the state failed to include any freshwater hydrology studies of Bayona in the restoration studies, and they provide no freshwater restoration alternatives. Next slide. This is a slide that shows, if you can see that little circled area around the end of the Bayona Channel there, that was the original Bayona Channel, sending water from the watershed from downtown LA out into Bayona, which was fresh water, and they ended it near Lincoln Boulevard there. Also, it's an indication that the Corps realized that this is a freshwater predominantly seasonal wetlands, and so it would benefit Bayona when they did that. To the right of that, I'd like you to notice, because we're going to look here again soon, that's an oil well, and it's called University City Syndicate. That oil well was abandoned by Playa Vista in the 2000-2001 timeframe, and it's leaking like a sieve. I'd also like you to notice that the beaches there are very narrow, because that becomes important later on also. Next slide, please, which is Area A, which is, this is seasonal water ponding on the north side of the channel in Bayona Wetlands. And next slide, please, is polywogs. The polywogs, frog eggs, are floating atop seasonal rainwater ponding in the shallow pickleweed in Area A, and frogs live in fresh water. Next slide, please, is Bayona's aquifers are classified as potential drinking water by the LA Regional Water Quality Control Board. And I think that this is also something that has been left out of the EIR for Bayona. The fact that we have all these underlying freshwater aquifers that need to be protected, especially nowadays. We have so many laws, which are in the blue there below, some of which, or all of these, are protective towards our groundwater resources. And this is also important because recently in a Prop 65 lawsuit, SoCalGas lost, and they have to remediate groundwater because of their contamination there. And part of their settlement agreement states that if that water quality changes, which it would if Bayona was to be dug out, they would no longer have to remediate to a drinking water standard, which legally it is classified as drinking water. So SoCalGas has a lot to gain by letting the state bring in salt water and let them off the hook. And ultimately, it would be the public, as usual, to be on the hook for remediation costs. Next slide, please. This slide shows water that is gallons that are permitted, that from the Howard Hughes site contamination, that are cleansed and used. And this diagram shows ½ inch of water for the area per day that could be used across Bayona. Instead, this water, while it is sent into the freshwater marsh, which is behind there along Lincoln Boulevard and Jefferson there, it is sent out through a main drain all the way out into the channel. So it's literally thrown away out into the ocean. Next slide. This is a result of the problems with the gas. Playa Vista has to get rid of water in order to have these gas mitigation systems have any chance of working. So this slide is of phase 2. Next slide, please, is of phase 1, all of which shows all of these areas are being pumped in order to lower the groundwater, in order to keep them out of the gas mitigation systems. And all of this water is simply thrown away, goes into the sanitary sewer, contrary to the EIR agreements with Playa Vista that the waters will be brought to the surface, cleansed and reused on site in order to replenish the underlying aquifers. Next slide. This slide is the Department of Fish and Wildlife and Playa Vista GRASSROOTS sued due to, you can see the two little red dots up in the mapped area. They have drains there that Fish and Wildlife has known about since they took over in 2004. So for the past 20-some years, those areas have been acting as drains and just draining away all that ponding rainwater. You can see on the far right of 122.17, there's a submerged drain that the following day, when the main drain opens up to the channel, it just gets thrown out into the ocean. Next slide. We brought the lawsuit. We actually prevailed in that, which allowed the Coastal Commission to then enforce the capping of those drains. So they have now been capped. And this next slide shows the open drain that Jonathan Coffin, one of our famous photographers out there, first noticed that this was happening and got me this photograph. Next slide, please. This happens to be gas from that freshwater area that I was in a kayak and collected the gas that we were working on a series of news stories with Burning Questions, which is a Peabody Award and Edward R. Murrow winning news series done on all the oil field gases outgassing at Playa Vista and Bayona, hence the name Burning Questions. Next slide, please. This is Picaro Imagery. It's a type of other imagery. It's not the infrared that you see. This is a graphic type, and this is that we worked with Nathan Phillips from Boston, who pioneered this. Look at all this gas. This is in the ambient air. And you drive along the roadway. So if we were able to go crisscrossing across the wetlands as well, I'm sure you would see far more. But you can see the catch basin right there. It's marked. And that's where University City Syndicate is outgassing there. And of course, the Playa Vista site, while they have gas mitigation systems, we have outgassing. This was actually through a lot of the sewer system that we were finding this gas that is a problem. And the residents there need to be protected and mitigation systems need to work. Next slide, please. Again, I'd like you to notice in the diagram that there is University City Syndicate, that well that I keep asking you to keep an eye on. Well, this, and also that capped drain, you can see it's capped in the left photograph. But what is really interesting now, in 2019, we had ponding water there, which was great. But now I'm going to show you something that we just found out. Jonathan noticed it. And I've been out there with a gas meter. Next slide, please. Fish and Wildlife has said that thing is sealed because they're using Playa Vista's consultants. That thing is not sealed. I took a gas meter out there. That is volatile gas coming out of there. That thing is not sealed. And Fish and Wildlife, because they're listening to Playa Vista's consultants, have stated there's no way that there could be secondary gas collecting in that system along the main drain, which is attached to this drain. And obviously it is. And currently, the Fish and Wildlife has an application in to keep this in place until the restoration occurs. Directly contrary to what the coastal commissioners told them, to not have it connect to any of the restoration plan whatsoever. Next slide, please. Here is a slide that, and remember in 2001, University City Syndicate was reabandoned due to low-level outgassing that was studied by ETI, and the city agreed and it was abandoned. Well, this is University City Syndicate's location, and it's outgassing like crazy. And I'm still in touch with Exploration Technologies, and I've put them in touch with the Water Board and CalGem. And now in 2020, ETI and his colleagues are expressing the need for reabandonment of again of this well, because it was poorly abandoned. It was abandoned by Playa Vista. And at this point, Playa Vista's comments are essentially, what gas? Well, guys, here's the gas. Next slide, please. There is your close-up of the outgassing that is occurring there 24/7. Next slide. Here we have a timeline that Walter Lamb put together for a presentation. And in 2004, restoration planning was expected to take 3 years and cost up to $2 million. Well, after $140 million to acquire Bayona, there was $25 million also to take care of it. And yet that hasn't happened. It was hijacked. This project got hijacked. And instead of the EIR and EIS that was ongoing from 2005 to 2012, they turned it into a Water Resource Development Act process to have the Army Corps only deal with the levees themselves. And right now, as you can see above the arrow, this is where Fish and Wildlife got the flood capacity miscalculation, and actually has known about it for a long time. That has to be corrected before the Army Corps can move forward, and we would like to see this whole situation stopped before that occurs. Next slide, please. This is our Native American, John Tommy Rosas, the tribal, Tongva ancestral tribal territorial nation videos that we have online. And here he overlays the plan of the state on top of the actual area. We're looking back, you can see Baldwin Hills right there in Culver City, and then looking back into the San Bernardino Mountains. Next slide shows looking down a little bit better for you to be able to see this. And he, because of his standing as a Native American, was able to, and Tatton being the most likely descendant, had the authority to be able to communicate with the Army Corps. So he too was in touch with the Army Corps regarding how the water is going to affect Bayona. And if you go to the next slide, this is the cover of the FEIR. And I kind of paraphrase Noam Chomsky here, saying the concept of truth just sort of disappears. This is quite a pretty little picture, but this is not what is going to happen. Bayona, number one, to do this, you would utterly destroy everything that's there, utterly destroy and kill all of the wildlife that is there, bury habitat that has endangered species. And instead, let's go to the next one, which I call the big dig, not what the public paid for. You can see, as John Tommy stated, that water is going to come up to those levees edges daily. Daily. It's going to inundate the entire area. The toxic effluent and pollution that is coming down the channel has not been fixed. It's all going to end up in Bayona. The trash is going to be stuck there as it flows out for low tide. This is catastrophic for Bayona. And certainly their early memos about this, they agreed it would never happen. It was way too drastic, way too risky, and yet here we are. The next slide goes back to one of the first I showed you, just so you can remember, again, where those berms are, where the dig out is, where the levees go. And let's go to the next slide, which this is their cutaway version on the top. And I highlight Culver Boulevard with my little cartoon down below, showing what cars and people will see when they're driving through this area with the levee on the right and the berm on the left. You've lost your views of Bayona, in addition to having destroyed the habitat and wildlife and buried habitat. Next slide. This is a Tatton diagram John Tommy put together showing general height of the berm. So you can see from ground level how high it would be and what would be gone from your view. The next slide is actually from Oregon. This is an actual levee. I think people need to understand the immensity of these. You can see the guy on the left there and the little teeny cars down there on the right. These are essentially 200 feet wide. And what we're looking at here is a mile. And for Bayona, they plan several miles worth of levees. And these levees are not wildlife friendly. You have to have mowed grasses for pest control. They will have vector control out there. So you have taken for Bayona, approximately 20% of the habitat on an already small area, and taken out yet another 20% of habitat as habitat. Next slide. Here, one of the myths in the EIR that they talk about, the 15 to 20 feet worth of fill from the marina that went into Area A that must be dug out. Well, it is a myth. Here is a photograph right after the marina was built. You can see the few buildings that are there down where Fisherman's Village later is there. They did add soil right through there for this building. But as you can see, the highlighted roadways there are raised roadways that the oil and gas crew would use so that they wouldn't get bogged down in the wetlands. Those are the same roadways that are there today. Next slide, please. Area A, you can see on the bottom, that's how it is today. You can see those same roadways exist, and up above it is when the marina was actually being built in the 60s, and those roadways still.
Yeah, this is Pete Rockwell again. I'm going to ask Patricia to wrap up her presentation now.
Because people probably have
We have another part of our program we have to go on with. Thank you, Patricia.